Last summer, I opened an adventure park. After some unexplainable tragedies, I permanently closed the gates. Have you ever seen We Bought a Zoo? I used to love that film. I repeatedly watched it when I was a kid, and I truly envied Matt Damon. I wanted to be him. Well, I just wanted Scarlett Johansson. I don't know, I'm getting sidetracked. I was once transfixed by the pristine Polaroid of the American dream that We Bought a Zoo created, though the story was actually based on a British family. Hollywood should purchase the rights to my tale of a dilapidated park's renovation. I have a hunch it might not reach the pitching floor. Now, obviously, any abandoned place is disconcerting. We Bought a Zoo added whimsy and wonder to the experience, but that wasn't realistic. There was an eerie atmosphere to the derelict farm that I transformed into an adventure park. It was, of course, compounded by the fact that I didn't have Scarlett Johansson by my side. Anyway, I wasn't entirely alone. My family came to my aid. We hired people and brought my vision of an adventure park to life. I will change the names in this story. My sister, Josie, was magnificent. My friend, Paul, was a lifesaver in every meaning of the word. Uncle Ron, however, just wanted a slice of the pie. I will list the horrible events that led to the closure of my park. The Ghost Train Incident. We opened the park gates in June 2022. May was a manic month. I was hiring as many people as possible to get everything up and running. There was so much to do that I was struggling to keep on top of every single issue. An employee named Tess worked on the Ghost Train ride. She was setting up decorations and lighting throughout the tunnels. One Friday night in May, she came running to me in floods of tears. Gary, the train engineer, had gone home early, leaving Tess on her lonesome in the darkened tunnels. She had the fright of her life when she spotted something that she didn't put there. An animatronic in a purple pinafore. Tess described the machine as a short girl with a grey face, baby blue eyes, and the menacing mouth of a metallic nutcracker. It was nearly 10 in the evening, and I was too tired to deal with yet another problem. Some of the other late-night workers teased Tess, and I rolled my eyes. She's just confused, I thought. I assumed that another member of staff had installed the animatronic without telling her. Begrudgingly, a few of us accompanied Tess to the ghost train tunnels, and we were unsurprised to find no sign of her mechanical ghoul. The girl was distraught, and she told me something after the others had left. She said the animatronic spoke. The mechanical girl said things that only Tess knew about herself. The machine made callous remarks, but its comments soon escalated to terrible threats. That was what had shaken Tess up. Gary's just pranking you," I said. Tess didn't come into work the next day. Nobody managed to get in contact with her. We just assumed the girl had quit without saying anything. I feared the financial burden of a harassment lawsuit due to the workplace bullying. But what actually happened was worse. The following day, Tess's mother came into the office and spoke to Paul. He later told me that her daughter had been missing since Friday night. The mother was wondering whether anybody had seen her go home. We hadn't. The entire situation gave me chills. Uncle Ron was simply peeved that Tess had left us in the lurch right before opening day, but I had a dreadful feeling about the whole situation. That sickening pit in my stomach was only deepened by Paul's incessant comments about the farm being built on unhallowed ground. Old local tales. My friend had warned me not to purchase the abandoned land. I should have listened to him. I explored the ghost train ride for clues about the girl's disappearance. I didn't find Tess, but I found something that was, perhaps, much worse. The animatronic. It was real. The machine with a malicious smile that hadn't been there when Tess led us through the tunnels. Seeing it with my own eyes, I had never been quite so petrified in my life. Her purple pinafore, most horrifyingly, was covered in blood. I cried in terror and immediately fled the tunnels. Uncle Ron urged me to keep quiet about the entire ordeal. He forced me back into the ghost train building, and we dragged the animatronic outside. My uncle loaded the unnatural machine onto the back of his truck and coldly warned me to keep my lips sealed. He wasn't going to let a prank ruin his investment, even though I had invested far more into the park. A few weeks later, we opened the gates to the public. The D11 incident. Aisle D, seat 11. The cursed seat. The jousting performance was one of our most popular attractions, and people were far too enthralled by the knights and jesters to notice the woman in D11, who was hit in the face by a child's airborne shoe. The culpable kid, who had thrown his footwear behind him in excitement, was forced to apologise, but the fuss quickly dissipated. The bloody-nosed woman left to clean herself up. It was Josie who first made a comment about the seat being cursed. The following week, we faced a slightly more serious incident in D11. A young boy violently choked on his sandwich. Fortunately, somebody dislodged the food item, but the boy's ribs were broken in the midst of the commotion. His unconscious body was carried out on a stretcher. I heard he made a full recovery, thankfully. 2 days later, however, something happened that finally prompted us to get rid of the seat. Paul tore it from the cement. I'm not a superstitious person, but the final incident was terrifying enough to make me question the very nature of the universe. Sitting in D11, a young man, who was perfectly healthy, according to reports and local rumours, suffered a fatal heart attack. Coroners had little to say, allegedly. "These things happen," the lead investigator said. Such things happened far too often in D11. The blind spot incident. This was the penultimate tragedy before my park's closure. 2 children went missing on the obstacle course in the woods. Nobody's sure how they vanished. There were so many people around. The woods were fenced. The entire park was fenced. The 2 boys simply slipped behind some trees and were never seen again. On the leaf-strewn clearing in which they disappeared, we found something inexplicably dreadful. 2 child-sized mannequins lay on the ground, and they were wearing the clothes of the missing children. The Blueberry Man incident. This is something direful that only came to light after the park's closure, and it certainly sparked a serious inquest. Many people still link this incident to the tragedy of the missing children from the obstacle course. It's certainly a terrible story. The Blueberry Man was not a member of my staff. My employees and I first became aware of his existence when children started to excitedly gush about delicious blueberry ice creams, and even blueberry pies that they had enjoyed at our park. At first, I chuckled at the bizarreness of such comments. We didn't sell blueberry products of any kind. "Yes, you do," one kid told me. "The Blueberry Man's stand is behind the petting farm." Members of staff tirelessly searched for this illegal stand, but nobody ever found the Blueberry Man behind the farm. Weeks later, after the park closed, a man was arrested for the kidnapping and murder of a child. In his basement, alongside a corpse that was mutilated beyond recognition, there were tubs of blueberries and a small fridge. What truly haunts me is that one of the responding officers, who was a friend of mine, said the man blubbered endlessly. "It wasn't my fault," he said. "The forest made me do it." Something in the woods spoke to him. Something old. The park closed as the result of many dreadful incidents. I'm struggling to summon the courage to tell the tale of the straw that broke the camel's back. I'm also not sure that you want to know it. But I will finish my story. Before I reveal the final nail in the coffin, I will mention a few more egregious events. The crying on the Carousel Incident. A girl started bawling on the carousel, so I offered to babysit. Meanwhile, her parents, obliging her whinging brother, joined the slightly older boy on the ride for a second time. The little girl, no more than 3 or 4 years old, was sobbing profusely. "Are you not a fan of the carousel?" I asked softly. I immediately cringed at my atrocious attempt to make small talk with a toddler. The girl cranked her head backwards to gaze up at me, and tears were drenching her cheeks. I'd seen upset children at the adventure park before, but I didn't see sadness in the girl's eyes. I saw fear. "It was over there," she said, pointing at the woods. "What? What did you see?" I asked her. "I'm not supposed to say," she whispered. "I don't want it to take me." We stood in silence until her family came off the carousel, and I didn't tell the parents what the girl had told me. The second ghost train incident. I must confess that, when I told Tess's tale, I was disingenuous. I didn't divulge everything that happened to the poor girl. In my defense, I didn't really want to talk about the final part of her story. No customers ever had any issues on the ghost train ride, as far as I'm aware. Nobody ever ran out of there in floods of tears. That should have been disparaging, especially when one considers that real horrors lurk within those tunnels. Thinking about it, why would a customer ever mention anything strange that they might have witnessed? They expected strange things to happen. One evening, I was expecting the ghost train. Those tunnels, even when lit with the orange hue of dingy lights, harboured a heavy darkness. Of course, I chalked it up to my imagination. Ever since the night of Tess's disappearance, I hadn't been the same person. As I rounded the final corner of the tunnel, I cried and rocketed out of my flesh. A mannequin. Like the ones we found by the obstacle course in the woods, it was wearing clothes. The park's official uniform. I already knew what name was printed on the badge. Tess. The most frightening thing about that mannequin was its pale, featureless face. As I dragged it out of the tunnel, I took a closer look. It may have been a drop of water from the ceiling, but something trickled from one of the mannequin's eyes. The Clownville Incident. Every other strange event in the park was dismissed, but not Clownville. Everything disintegrated in August. All of the park's horrendous tragedies were either secrets or, in the case of D11, easily rationalised. The actions of the Blueberry Man had not come to light, so it was only the case of the 2 missing children from the obstacle course that had led to any form of police investigation. But our gates were still open. I wish we'd closed sooner. There's a story that I've been hesitant to tell. It's about the park section that, for the sake of anonymity, I shall call Clownville. This is the story of how my park closed its gates. I wanted to include a miniature circus in the park to distinguish it from my competitors. I never really settled on an overarching theme for the adventure park. "Look at this creepy thing," Paul said. My friend passed me a clown mask. It differed from the others. It had disproportionately small eyes. The painted smile on the front seemed far too jolly. And something about a cheerful clown is unnerving, isn't it? "Maybe John wants a special mask that distinguishes him from the other clowns," I suggested. John was our chief clown. It was a title he boastfully bestowed upon himself during his very first circus performance. It made him happy, and that's an ideal temperament for a clown, so I allowed it. John always seemed a little too engrossed in the character, but I didn't really care at the time. The visitors were engaged, tickets were selling. I was content. "No, what distinguishes John from the other clowns is that he's a nut job." Paul laughed. I snorted. "You know, Samantha said that she would headbutt John if he were ever to refer to her as cute clown on stage again." "Ugh, is that what he called her? Why did he give them such weird names?" Paul asked. It educates the little ones about harmful stereotypes from a young age. And what's more special than that, Paul?" I asked sarcastically. "Chubby clown, cute clown, crazy clown, and chief clown. And the biggest clown of all? The idiot who thought Clownville was a good idea. Me." Paul laughed. With Richard gone, John keeps saying he's going to get you up on that stage to perform with him. What's your clown name going to be?" I thought for a moment. Coerced clown. "Nice alliteration," Paul nodded. Richard quit the week before, so I'd been trying to find a 5th clown for John's big Saturday show. Hiring a willing clown in my town was an impossible feat, but Richard's part wasn't exactly hard to perform. Plus, he was on a much lower salary than the others, which is why John had called him cheap clown. A little harsh, but all Richard had to do was pass tools to the more skilled performers, and occasionally crack a joke. I was capable of doing that. I just didn't want to do it. John was persistent, however, and as the week progressed, his eagerness for me to perform in his show viciously bloomed. His demeanour was beginning to unsettle people. After donning the new mask at the start of the week, his mood changed. He'd transformed from strange to sinister. John had always been exuberant and far too passionate about the circus, but he started to develop a feverishness. We never saw him without his mask. Nobody called him John without invoking his wrath. "I am Chief Clown," he once told me. By Friday, many employees were describing John as unhinged. There was a minor brawl in the changing room between him and Keith, who played Chubby Clown. "I don't get paid enough for this," Keith fumed. "Either he goes or I go." "We know," Paul said, "but a lot of people booked tickets for Saturday and the park wouldn't recover from the financial hit of issuing 1,000 refunds. Will you be able to do tomorrow's big show, Keith? I don't know how we'd be able to hire a trained trapeze artist to replace you. We haven't even been able to replace Richard. The boss is getting involved. That's how you know it's serious." We managed to convince Keith to persevere. Samantha simply avoided John, and Thomas, otherwise known as Crazy Clown, was such a boisterous bundle of madness that he didn't seem to care about his deranged colleague. "This is the most interesting John's ever been," he joked with us. On Saturday evening, 1 hour before the 7 o'clock show, I was in the dressing tent with Paul and Josie. My sister was trying to make Richard's large clown costume look a little more shapely on my slender body. "We need a belt or something," she said. "Maybe 2 belts. "As long as it stays up on stage, I don't mind," I said. "It might get us a bit more press if you do something like that." Paul chuckled. Once I was ready, I waddled over muddy grass to the actor's tent in my clunky, uncomfortable costume. The night's thick rainfall was loud. Too loud to hear what had transpired in the tent. I'll never forget the rush of vomit to my mouth when I walked through the tent flaps. Chubby Clown, Cute Clown, and Crazy Clown were all sitting on the sofa before me. Each clown sat rigidly. At first glance, their masks appeared to have been fastened to their faces. But then I realised that their masks had become their faces. Their flesh had been surgically removed, and their clown masks had been unevenly stitched to their heads. There were streaks of blood on the sides of their gleefully grinning mask faces. I'm not sure how long I froze, but I was suddenly aware of guttural breathing. Squirreled away in the corner of the tiny tented area, I saw him. John. Chief Clown. He no longer looked human. He was on his haunches. The horrible black-eyed mask had been stitched to his face. That jolly grin beamed at me. On the grassy ground, I spotted an assortment of stained surgical tools and circular strips of skin. Faces. Chief Clown scuttled towards me on all fours. He lunged, and I blindly swung my fist. It connected with John's jaw, producing an almighty cracking sound. And the demented subhuman fell backwards. I grimaced in horror at his twisted neck. I've killed him, I thought. Then, possessed by some supernatural force, he began to writhe, and he snapped his neck into an unnatural contortion that would have killed any living human. His black eyes, surveying me from a masked head that was now hanging upside down, were horribly piercing. He screeched in a voice that was like no earthly sound I had ever heard. I gazed into the face of the thing that I was sure would end me. And I knew, in that moment, It was the thing that haunted my land. The king of demons. The thing that girl had seen in the woods. The thing that had reduced poor souls into mannequins. The voice that spoke to the blueberry man. Ah! Paul screamed. I didn't see my friend enter the tent, but I heard him. I'd been too deeply transfixed by the haunting eyes which burrowed into my soul. Chief Clown turned to face Paul, but it was too late. My friend buried the hatchet, both figuratively and literally, disconnecting John's upside-down head from his torso in a swift motion. We both stood there for several minutes, eyeballing John's decapitated corpse. Paul and I were waiting for the thing that had possessed him to revive his body, but he lay still. A mass murderer, that's what the police called him. But Paul and I saw what Chief Clown became in his final moments. To this day, I refuse to sell the park. Nobody else needs to suffer there. That land wasn't made for us.